Hello, you're listening to Talking Tales, the podcast. What you're about to hear is a live recording from the Talking Tales Storytelling Night, held in Bristol and hosted by Stokes Croft Writers. To find out more, visit www.stokescroftwriters.com. We hope you enjoy the show.
Our first reader tonight is the legendary Thomas David Parker, who is now the tallest person in Stokes Croft Writers, now that Nick's left, and manages to look fabulous in velvet. So please welcome Tom to the stage.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm ever so slightly taller, so let's just adjust that. So, lovely to be here. This is actually the first story, or the first ever completed story that I wrote when I was 8 years old. I've redrafted slightly. Yes, you'll find that I'm a very disturbed individual and probably explains a lot. It's called The Shell. I used to have 2 brothers. Now, I only have 1. I'm the only one who remembers what happened. They were both older. Peter was 12, Robert had just turned 10, and I was 6.5. We'd gone to the seaside for a family holiday. We even took the dog, who entertained everyone with attempts to bite the sea after a rogue wave got her soaking wet. It was a warm August day, but overcast. A typical British holiday, really. My brothers were both strong swimmers and soon rushing off into the sea and diving through the waves. I wasn't so confident, though. Knowing that the onslaught of teasing I'd get for wearing armbands, I chose to go through the rock pools instead. It was there where I first saw the shell. It was about the size of my fist, and I reached into the pool and grabbed it instinctively. It was a treasure, something precious that I needed to possess. It was hard and smooth, and when I turned it over on the underside, it was pure white. It had a long, thin, serrated opening along one edge, and it looked a bit like a mouth. Eee! It screeched at me. I dropped it in shock. There was a small plop as it fell back into the pool. I stared in amazement at this muffling screeching still continued. A small stream of bubbles flowed out of the shell and onto the surface. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. But I couldn't run away. I was rooted to the spot and fascinated by this turn of events. Thoughts raced through my mind. Do I tell my parents? This wasn't an ordinary shell, that much I could work out, but would my parents know what to do? What if it was magic? What if it was an alien? What if it grants wishes? Soon the screeching stopped and the stream of bubbles began to slow down. Although I was scared, I didn't feel in any immediate danger. Nervously, I reached in and picked up the shell again. It felt exactly the same, but for some reason I dropped it and backed away slowly. I'm not sure what I expected to happen. Maybe some tentacles or claws or spidery legs would come out and try and grab me, but whatever it was, it made my skin crawl. I stared at it, uncertain what to do next. Suddenly, a spurt of water came out, and then another. It was as if it was coughing. I won't lie, I must admit there was a spurt of water that came out of me too, but I was 6, and I doubt your bladders would hold under the circumstances. Help! A faint little voice cried out. Help me! Hello, I said. I'm so lonely, said the shell. Will you be my friend? I looked around to make sure the voice wasn't coming from anywhere else, but there was no one nearby. My brothers were still swimming, and my parents were setting up a picnic about 50 yards down the beach. I discovered something magical. This was really a treasure. Okay, I said, I'll be your friend. I wasn't quite sure what kind of friendship I'd have with a talking shell, but I was open to new experiences. Then join me, said the shell. Join me in the shell. I paused. This could be the call to a great adventure, but what if I was wrong? What if it was a trap? I felt frightened. I didn't know what was going on, but it felt dangerous. It's so lonely in here, the shell said. Won't you come in and join me? I was about to refuse when my parents called out that it was time for lunch. Looking back, I realised I should have just left it and gone to them, but I didn't. I took it with me. I thought I was being smart, showed the shell to my parents, and they'll tell me what to do. But Of course, as soon as I showed it to them, it didn't say anything. It didn't do anything. My mum just thought I was playing a game, and my dad just wanted me to stop shoving a shell in his face. It was only my brother Peter who believed me. After lunch, my mother and my brother Rob went to walk the dog, whilst my dad, Peter, and I cleared away the picnic. Once everything was done, my father took a nap, which left Peter and I to examine the shell. Peter thought it would be a good idea to return to the rock pools. He thought it might give the shell power or something. But we're only halfway back when it started talking again. "Hello," it said. "Will you be my friend?" "Who are you?" asked Peter. "I don't have a name," said the shell. "Will you give me a name?" "All right," said Peter, and he thought for a moment. "I'll call you Shelley." "Oh, my name is Shelley," said the shell. "What's your name?" "I'm Peter." "Will you be my friend, Peter?" "Of course, Shelley," he said with a grin, and he looked at me in excitement, as if we were playing a marvellous game. The voice in the shell became slightly higher too, as if it was excited. "Will you join me, Peter? Join me in the shell?" Peter looked at me and gave me a wink. "Yes, I will." It's the next moment that haunts me. The moment he turned to me, half laughing, half excited, at what would happen next. It's so vivid in my mind because as he laughed, he suddenly became frozen like a picture. It was as if I was watching TV and the screen had just frozen. He was stuck in that half-blended expression when the wind caught up and he disintegrated into thousands of tiny pieces. They blew around me and stung my skin and formed a whirlwind. I watched as they were sucked all the way down into the shell and through that serrated mouth-like opening. It's probably just my imagination, a memory distorted over time, but when I think back to those moments after Peter disappeared, I swear that mouth was smiling just a little bit more than usual. I'm not sure how long I stood there, but before I knew it, my mother and Rob had returned with the dog and wanted to know what I was doing. Peter, I stammered, unable to get the words out. He turned to sand and got sucked into the shell. "Who's Peter?" my mother asked. "My brother," I said, shocked that she didn't know her own son. "I'm your brother, stupid," said Rob, giving me a punch on the arm and clearly pissed off that he thought I got his name wrong. "Our other brother, idiot," I said, pushing him as I burst into tears. Our mother split us apart and took us back to the car. It soon became clear that no one else remembered him and all traces of Peter's life had disappeared. I was the only one who remembered. It was tough for a while, and my parents became increasingly worried about my behaviour. I would act out at school, and I even got into a few fights because of it. Then I got sent to therapy to see this quack called Dr. Clark, who was convinced I'd invented Peter to act as some kind of father figure because my dad worked away a lot. It was such bullshit. I told them everything that had happened again and again, but they never believed me. The truth is, they didn't want to. Crazy kids, far less scary than the possibility that what I said was real. After a while, I gave up trying to convince people. I realised the world keeps on turning, whatever I did, and conforming to society's expectations was just the easier option. So I took the pills, did the exercises, wrote what they wanted me to write, and said what they wanted me to say, and eventually they left me alone. I've never returned to the beach, though, and I've never forgotten. Despite not having anyone to talk about it, well, no one that would understand, I still have something that keeps me going. Shell. Turns out Peter's alive and well. He's just living inside the shell with Shelley. I've kept them safe after all these years, and I hear them sometimes, and we talk now and then. No one else can hear them, but I find it easier when I speak to Peter. And he seems okay when he's talking to me. He and Shelley are fine in their own way. But they keep telling me how they're getting lonely, just the two of them in the shell. I admit sometimes I'm tempted to join them, but I know I just can't disappear. There's so much I want to see, so much I want to do, so much more of the world to experience. Maybe one day, though. Although sometimes I wonder, what if I didn't have to? Just because they're lonely doesn't mean it has to be me that joins them. What if I introduce someone else to the show? Thank you.
Very good, Tom. Never going to be able to go to the seaside and relax ever again. Thanks. There's cake on your tables. I forgot to mention it. Mel's made some chocolate balls. You can stick them in your mouth and suck them if you would like to. They're vegan and vegetarian and gluten-free. So literally anyone can eat them and not die. So, not unless you've got a nut allergy. Almost got into trouble there. That could have been disastrous. Okay, next up we have the delectable Suzanne McConaghy reading with Malice Aforethought.
Good evening. Exhausted after giving his talk on crime genres at the Bristol Crime Writers Convention, Sebastian Green, psychological crime, stepped into the lobby of his hotel. A clerk was on duty in the dimly lit reception area. "Could you point me in the direction of some books? I'm too wound up to sleep tonight." "On your left in the dining room. Take whatever you like, sir." The convention was only halfway through. It was going well for Sebastian, but he was sick of the talk of the murders. There had been 3 already, 1 each night. The first body had been found in the cold plunge bath of the Georgian house. The second, seated on a balcony of the Cabot Tower. And the third had been wedged between the seats in the back row of the Hippodrome. The police were baffled. The visitors, particularly the authors, were increasingly worried. You couldn't ignore the fact that the victims had all been crime writers. Who could say where it would end? Quite a few of the writers, true to their kind, were having a go at doing just that. "Obviously he's killing off the opposition," said Mike Gould, police procedural, laughing as he failed to see that he might be the opposition. "Could go on for a long time." "The police are not up to it," said James Marlowe, hard-boiled crime. He affected a battered fedora in the Humphrey Bogart style and smoked a pipe, emulating his heroes of the 1940s. "Corruption," he muttered darkly, probably trying to see an angle for his next novel. Sebastian scanned the small collection of books. Katie Price? He didn't think so. Geoffrey Archer? Not his style. A series of 1940s Green Penguins by John Stokes Mayhew looked just the thing. He carried them up to his room, and it didn't take him long to get through the first, which was titled The Bath Murder. Well, someone had just committed another murder in a bath. He opened the second volume, Corpse on View. Curious, he searched for the scene of the murder, his thoughts not headed in any particular direction, until he saw that this body had been found on a balcony. Completely alert now, he snatched up Death in the Gods, and sure enough, a young woman was discovered with her throat cut in the topmost tier of seats at the theatre. 3 murders that exactly paralleled those that had just happened. Excited, Sebastian rifled through the pages of the final volume with Malice Aforethought. There it was. The broken corpse lay by the waterside. He sprang to his feet and grabbed his phone, finally getting through to the investigating team. D.I. Nicholson? "I think I know where the next murder will be. The victim will be a man. You may be in time to prevent it. It should take place in the early hours of this morning, 3 o'clock to be exact." Nicholson didn't actually put the phone down on him, but it took Sebastian a long time to get his ideas across. Harry Bosch would have been a lot quicker off the mark, he thought. But finally, it seemed to get through. "Where exactly, Mr. Green?" I don't know, it didn't say. Just that it was at the waterside. Do you know how many miles of waterside we have in Bristol? I don't have the manpower. According to the story, the body was horribly mangled. Those were the words used. It must be to do with machinery. There was a long silence, so long that Sebastian thought Nicholson had gone away. Right, I'm on to it. Keep this to yourself, Mr. Green, and don't try to get involved. This is not for amateurs. That's the last thing I'd want to do, thought Sebastian, who preferred all his violence to be contained between the pages of a good book. He paced about in his room. There was a knock at the door. Opening it, he saw fellow guest and writer Geraldine Wells. Cosy crime. Look, sorry to bother you, but I heard you moving around, and I thought, well, maybe you can't sleep. I wondered if, well, I want to go for a walk. Would you mind coming with me? I feel a bit nervous given what's been happening. Happy to, Miss Wells. It may help me sleep as well. When he was in the middle of a novel, which he was at the moment, Sebastian didn't notice his surroundings. Miss Wells, however, seemed to know exactly where she was going. This is an interesting area, she said. There are still working boatyards here. They descended Merchant's Road at a fast trot. With the moon playing in and out of the clouds, it was hard to see where they were going. But, finally, they arrived at an iron gate, Underfall Yard. Ah, a pity, it's locked, said Sebastian, who was beginning to see just how unfit he was, and had hoped that there would be somewhere to sit. Not a problem. Look, we can slip through here. They walked along a dark passage between industrial buildings, and when they turned a corner, the water glistened a short distance away. Sebastian sank down on a block of wood. Well, let's just sit for a moment. I've got blisters. Tell me how you got into writing, he added, pulling off a shoe. It was something I always enjoyed doing, but my work is rather, well, I suppose, tame. I've decided it's time for something different. What's your background, then? Are you going to use it? I was in the army for 8 years. Sebastian looked up sharply, reassessing. So much for the academic look and the serious dark-rimmed spectacles. What did you do? War zones, you know, Iraq, Afghanistan. God, you should be writing thrillers. He looked around vaguely. It gave him a jolt to see a massive chain strung taut, and the words, "The Winch Shed." It looked like a scene from a tarte noir novel. Rebus would have found himself right at home here. Would the police have staked it out? Of course they would, but they wouldn't make themselves obvious if they wanted to catch the killer. Bugger, he said, remembering Nicholson had told him to keep well away from any activity. I think we'd better move on. No, we're okay, relax. Sebastian began to feel uneasy. How come this trained soldier, with her experiences in a place like Afghanistan, was afraid to walk around the city? He shoved the shoe on and stood up. I have to get back. I'm afraid not, Sebastian. I'm really sorry. I always loved your books. A lot of consolation that was. He felt sick as the gun glinted in the moonlight. Just walk, she said, thrusting it into his neck. Look, I don't understand. Shut up and walk. She pushed him onto the slipway. He was thinking furiously. She couldn't kill him here, not if she wanted to copy the murder outlined in the book and leave his body a bloody, broken mass of skin and bone. And that did seem to be her M.O. Then his heart sank. The winch. Of course. Why me, Miss Wells? Just keep her talking. The police couldn't be far away. I heard what you said to the clerk and saw which books you picked up. It was only a matter of time before you worked it out with your expertise. I had to stop you before you called the police. They'd soon have been there, questioning everyone, and then where would I have been? He really hadn't worked out that it was her, but he got the drift. He would have drawn the attention of the police to the guests at the Brunel. I've already called the police. You're too late. I don't believe you. And what feeble reasons did you use to select your other victims? A look of irritation crossed her face. Jeremy Banfield was threatening to expose me for plagiarism, the grubby little blackmailer. I'd have been ruined. And the other two? He was watching the gun, waiting for a moment's inattention. Wrong place, wrong time, for them. I was experimenting based on those books you took. The army taught me a thing or two, but the killing was always at a distance. I needed to know how it would feel to do it, and how to walk away from it. After the first one, I knew I could. Yet she'd carried on. She had to be a psycho, completely crazy. They were near the end of the slipway, his feet already in the water. The chain of the winch was attached to a boat. If she started the machinery, it would pull the boat up. He had no doubt she intended him to be lying on the slipway, ready to be crushed. That old James Bond scenario. Only no one would be coming along to save him. Still no sign of the police. Well, out of condition or not, he wasn't going to let her kill him without a fight. He swung round and jabbed his fist at her throat. Surprised, she staggered back, and he tried to make his way up to the yard. But she was right there with him. He lunged at her again and fought hard, gaining a little ground. She couldn't really have had much close combat experience. His heart was beating fast enough to choke him. He was carrying too much weight, yes, but surely he wasn't going to have a heart attack right now. Was this to be the end? Even Morse had collapsed on a relatively fine day in a nice quadrangle. She managed to get on top of him. He had his hands around her throat, trying to keep her close so that she couldn't shoot him. But he could see no way of getting the gun off her. Then someone lifted her off, and she dropped the weapon with a clatter. "He attacked me," she screamed. "It's his gun. I was trying to defend myself." It was another 6 hours before the police let him go, and Sebastian finally got back to the Brunel. Now, he thought, perhaps he would sleep.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. That was wonderful. Right, next up we have a gentleman who seems to be being published in every magazine, anthology, and on every website in the world at the present point in time. We have the legendary Mr. Pete Sutton.
Hello. I'm going to read a story called Roadkill, which is the first story in my forthcoming short story collection. 1. There's a pause of a few minutes. 2. I'm annoyed, yet curious. "What you doing?" I say. "Counting." "I can see that. What you counting?" 3. He gives me a sharp look. Them. I follow where my little brother is pointing out the back window and see a red splash and what might be black feathers in a lump disappearing behind us on the side of the road, lurid in the backlights. "Ew, gross! Mum, he's counting dead things." Be nice to your brother, Mikey. Great words, said with no inflection. She's really not thinking, she's concentrating on the road. I almost say, "But Mum," when I see her glance in the rearview mirror. Her eyes make me stop. It's not my fault the whole day was crap. Why did we go to the Isle of Wight anyway? Without Dad. Taking Granny across my arms. What a crap idea. What a crap holiday. 4. You've got to be kidding. There's no way there's been 4 dead things, I start. But he gives me the look. It's not right to be frightened of your little brother, is it? Although, if anyone ever said that to me, I'd punch their lights out. It's a good job he likes me. 5. I look behind the car. I can't tell what it is, but it's bloated and strange, with legs sticking in the air like antennas. He looks at me smugly. Granny is snoring in the front. She and Mum are the only ones, apart from me, that seem to be able to talk to him, without him freaking out. That's why I call him the Horror. 6. Seriously? He gives me a look with his eyes almost rolling up into his head and makes a face. I know better than to argue. Why don't you boys try and get some sleep, Mum says. So I close my eyes, all the better to ignore the little Horror. 7. That's a secret never to be told, isn't it, Mum? Uh-huh. Isn't it, Mikey? I turn my back and make sleepy noises. Never to be told, he murmurs quite close to my ear. I do my best to ignore him. The sound of the wheels on the tarmac lulls me. I am comfortable. I drift off. The last thing I hear is 8. Later, I wake sweaty and confused. It's quiet. Why have we stopped? There's a lorry on the other side of the road with its full beams and hazards on. In front of it, lying down and apparently nonchalantly chewing the cud, is a cow. Why is there a cow on the road? Shh, go back to sleep. Need to go pee. Mikey, take your brother to go to the toilet. I sigh and get out of the car. I walk all the way around the trailer which holds all our camping stuff and open the door. He is waiting. I take his hand and we walk over to the hedge. Not here, Granny can see. I turn to look and sure enough Granny is looking out of the window, seemingly at us, although you never can tell what's going on in Granny's head, or if she's looking now, or into the past, or even the future. She's not been the same since Dad, since it happened. Come on then. I take them deep into the bushes. Turn around. We've played this game before, I know my part. I turn and look at the road. I notice a set of headlights approaching fast. I see the lorry driver, or maybe it's the farmer standing in the middle of the road. He's trying to flag down the car. It's going too fast. It swerves to miss him and plows straight into our trailer. There's an almighty bang! I see the trailer disintegrating and our car go up on its front wheels, and then back down with another bang. I leave the Horror and run to the car. It's a mess. If we'd been in the back, we'd be dead. Gran has lost her teeth and is bent down in the footwell looking for them. Mum looks white as a sheet. I stare at the car that hits ours. It's big, a Rover or a Mercedes or something. The guy staggers out. The car is skewed across the road, partially blocking the lights from the truck. Who the fuck decides to park on a fucking tiny fucking country fucking road? He starts, slurring his words like Dad used to when he got home. Is everyone all right? I decide he is the farmer. He looks like one. Mum is just getting out of the car. She looks at me. You're all right. It's a statement, not a question. I look round for the Horror. He stood just behind me, staring at the mess. Our stuff is all over the road. 9. I look at him without understanding, then turn to the road. The man's car has smashed into ours, bounced off and hit the cow. He looks up at me. 9 is for hell, he says. I look over at the man. And 10. 10 is for the devil's own self. He takes my hand as the man slumps down on the road, pulling at his collar. Mum and the farmer are by the man's side. He's got a funny colour. I can tell that even from where I'm standing. He's making small choking sounds, and I can hear between my mum saying, "Are you okay? What's happening? It's just like Paul. Can't you do something?" Paul is my dad. Was my dad. I look at my little brother. He's staring at the man who's now lying down. My mum is shouting at the farmer, "Do something, for God's sake, do something!" and crying. She used to cry a lot when Dad came home all shouty and slurry and had to teach her a lesson. The man is not moving. My mum is crying. I'm standing at the side of the road holding my brother's hand. He looks up at me and says, "Never to be told." Thank you.
Very good, Pete, very good. And a fabulous T-shirt as well, I've got to say. Rock on! Sorry, I've had 2 beers now. That's it. Next up, we have a Talking Tales veteran. She's performed at quite a few of them, I think. Most of them. All of them? All of them. All of them. Maybe not. Who knows? Please welcome to the stage Angela Brooks, who will be reading Love, Whatever That Is.
That's about right. Hi. Right. This is the story of love, whatever it is. A couple who never argue, and they do everything together. I saw him as soon as he walked into the room, wearing a blue T-shirt, black chinos. He looked cool and confident. He looked at me and came over. Jack Story. Have we met? His eyes were dark blue, almost navy, and fringed with thick, dark lashes. I held his gaze, feeling for a moment that nothing else existed. Just me and Jack, alone. I don't think so, I managed at last. My name is Maria. We drank champagne, ate the party nibbles provided, chatted and laughed, and felt as if we'd known each other forever. If I'd ever believed in previous lives, that first meeting with Jack proved a theory. We knew each other, needed no one else from that moment. Friends and family all drifted away, got on with their own lives, as Jack and I made no contact with them. Oh, I'd have the odd phone call, the odd text or email, all saying the same. How are you? We're all okay. Must meet up soon. And that was it. Duty done. I didn't mind. I had Jack. Somehow, we became one. We liked the same programmes on telly. We enjoyed the same food. Got up at the same time every morning. Went to bed together at the same time every night. We started to wear the same clothes. T-shirts or sweaters in the same colours. Jeans or chinos matching. Jack grew his hair to almost the same length as mine. We looked like brother and sister, almost twins. We never argued. We agreed on everything. Sex, politics, religion. Nothing caused even the slightest argument. We'd been together 10 years when Jack rocked our boat. He brought home a woman from work. Someone he'd never mentioned before. She was blonde and pretty, I suppose, if you like that sort of thing, with a wide, red, lipsticky smile. I was bewildered and scared. We didn't need this person. We had each other. And that was all we needed. Jack wouldn't look at me. He introduced Linda, saying she was new at work and had just moved into our town and needed someone to show her around. Jack had invited Linda to dinner. On an impulse. I was shocked. We didn't do that sort of thing. Jack suggested that we go to the little red Italian restaurant just around the corner. Our favourite. I couldn't see his dark blue eyes. They seemed to be shielded from me. Linda hoped I didn't mind just popping in like that. Linda said we were both so kind. I changed my clothes. Jack didn't. We didn't look the same. He was wearing his working suit. Why didn't he change so that he looked like me? The three of us walked out and down the road, around the corner to Luigi's. Jack was in the middle between me and Linda, and his head turned to Linda, and he talked to Linda. In the restaurant, he and Linda had an argument about politics, and Jack laughed. He never laughed like that, with me. I ate my lasagne in silence. I drank my wine in silence. And Jack and Linda talked, ate and drank and laughed, and I might just as well have been invisible. Later, Jack, Linda and I walked back, and I opened our door. Jack said he would walk Linda home and wouldn't be long. I entered our house, and for the first time in 10 years, there was no one there except me. I walked about from room to room, seeing for the first time that there was nothing there that I particularly liked. Everything in that house was a compromise. I took all the scatter cushions off the furniture and threw them into the little front garden. I scattered them over the lawn, edged with little twee edging plants. Of course, I moved the settee and the easy chairs into different positions, and I placed one of the chairs in an alcove by the window. I got the kitchen shears from the scissor jug in the kitchen. A place for everything in its place, you know, and chopped 6 inches off the bottoms of the curtains and used the pieces to tie back the curtains like they do in fancy magazines. I ran upstairs and I swept all of Jack's toiletries, moisturisers, gels, lotions, into a large carrier bag. I stripped the bed and left it stripped. I heard the key turn in the lock downstairs. I ran down, and there was Jack, smiling and confident, as handsome as ever, with the same secretive look screening his eyes. There was a faint red mark on his cheek. He was holding a scatter cushion and staring open-mouthed at the changes I'd made. Did you see Linda home safely? I asked, my lips barely moving. Oh, yes. And Linda said, thank you for a lovely evening. Jack could hardly stop a smile curving his lips as he mentioned her name. What's going on here, darling? Everything all right? Are we changing things around? I am changing things around, I answered. You've changed things, and now nothing is the same. I was simply being kind. I really didn't think you'd mind. Jack sounded weary as he looked at me for the first time that terrible evening. I felt perhaps we should do something different. I was outraged. I didn't want different. Everything was perfect until Linda. He was my world and I am his. He looked unhappy and he realised at last that he'd upset me. We were broken. Jack had done something momentous when he'd taken a selfish initiative. He'd broken the we. He sat down heavily into the easy chair by the window. He leaned back, sighed loudly and closed his eyes, shutting me out. I grabbed the kitchen shears I'd been using earlier and I plunged them into his chest. His eyes flew open in shock as I stabbed him again and again and again until he no longer stared at me. I ran upstairs, grabbed the bedding from the bedroom floor. I wrapped Jack in a sheet and then in the duvet. I dragged him out of the house and into the garage. At last pulled the shears from his chest. I knelt down beside him and kissed his cheek after rubbing away the faint red mark using a damp flannel. I thought I could smell Linda's perfume, but I ignored it. I will always love the man you were, I whispered. You would not have been happy with Linda. We've always just been one. No room for any other. Night-night, Jack. I got the kitchen shears again, and holding them high above my head, I drove them into my own chest. We are one again.
Thank you, Angela. Lovely uplifting tale, all about love. Right, so closing the first half this evening, we have Grace Palmer, who is one of the organisers of Novel Nights, and the next one is next Thursday, I think. So everyone needs to come to that too. Grace, telling a story called Telling the Time.
Telling the time. John marched up and down. "You'll wear a hole in the carpet," his mother had said. 59, 60, 61, 89. Where was he? How had he ended up here? Was it night or day? The time was punctuated by a metal grill sliding back in the door. A steel shelf thrust towards him. A hand appeared and slid a plastic plate of food onto the shelf. The hand was large, fleshy, with the liver spots and thin silver hairs. It was a married hand, with a thick gold ring claiming the finger. John looked at his bony fingers taking the plate of food. This was the closest he got to anyone else. For that split second or so, the hands shared the same plate of food. There was a giver and a receiver. "Hello," he tried. But the grill had already answered, shutting out the light, and with it any clue of who the man's hand was attached to, or what happened outside this place. 97, 98, 99, 46. Where was he? He played that game so often as a kid, counting things to pass the time. Ah, yes, the doctor's waiting room, 1960s. Pharmacist Ken behind the counter, measuring out tablets for the small white boxes stacked high on shelves behind him. Ken spoke to his mother, ticked them off in a register. The smell of disinfectant and floor polish made him want to sneeze. A green smell, unpleasant and overpowering. John could never wait to get out of the strange place. But Ken was still there, staring at John, and John stared back. Ken's white medical coat had short sleeves. It didn't cover enough flesh. His arms were white and scaly. He wasn't a man like his dad, whose arms were thick and muscled from carrying buckets and lifting bales and fixing tractors, or the hardware shop man with his buck teeth, bald head, brown saggy work jackets worn over a grubby shirt and tie. No, Ken was skinny, and the collar of his tunic stood up like Spock's on Star Trek. He was strange and a stranger. Ken waved them through, and John and his mum entered the waiting room where women wore nylon headscarves knotted under their chins, whispering to each other as they watched the big clock with the black hand. His mum was wearing the light brown coat. He now knew the colour was beige. Of course he did. She gave him a Janet and John book from the cardboard box in the corner. He'd read it 100 times. They had 6 books at school. He wanted more stories, but the teacher said you had to practice getting each word right, and 6 stories were plenty. The chair was too big. The hard plastic bit into his legs above his long grey socks, and a thin metal leg scraped the floor as he jiggled to get more comfortable. He leant the chair back as far as it would go. "Don't kibble," hissed his mum, and smacked his bare legs. So he drummed his feet on the black and white linoleum and counted 65, 66, 67, 68, from the cracks in the ceiling, the cobwebs, the people in the room, the chairs, any pattern he could fix on. And he didn't even have to start at 1. He could do that. He was doing it. 24, 25. In the car, another time, trying to stop the green feeling in his stomach as they cornered the fat old maxi, all 4 kids shoved in a back, and John fingering the chrome tulip-like lock, which he pushed up and down, hearing the clunk, 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 instead of his brother teasing him again. This time he'd count the telegraph poles, swaying their lines in wind. Sometime rooks would be sitting on them, black as soot. He liked swallows better, wheeling their way across the autumn stubble. Some evening starlings swarmed and swirled in the skies, inky blue in a shape that kept on changing and growing and flowing. But there he was, looking at the rooks, counting the poles, counting to stop the porridge and ribena chiming up his gut in a burning acid rush, and drowning the sound of his brother. Stupid John, stupid John. 70, 71, 72, 99. How had he got here? He turned again in the room and tried to remember what his mother had said. 89, 96, 92. Spots on the floor. Mouse droppings? scraps of food he'd rolled into pellets. She had a particular smell, face powder and daffodils. He could see her beige coat now, with the curved horn buttons, and her voice sounded clear in his head as she brought her hand down, sharp on his legs. "Now just stop it, John, will you? Stop it." And then later, in a pink nightie, with her teeth in a glass by the bed, next to a pile of Ladies' Friends magazines, her U-shaped dentures swimming around in a fizz, she gripped his hand. Cold hands, leathery skin, scrapey nails, and she says, "Why? John, why?" 45, 78, 94. Thank you.
Christie's got an announcement.
Hello. Apparently, Talking Tales has a mystery benefactor who brings booze, which is the best type of benefactor, unless he's an evil genius. But no. Anyway, so we have free cocktails that Tom's going to serve at the bar, and he did tell me what's in it, and I have forgotten. It's something ginger beer.
Pretty close.
Yeah, I've forgotten the important bits.
Gin, martini dry, ginger beer, bit of elderflower,
Yeah, nicely sold, Tom. Nicely sold. Right. So please help yourselves. It's the break. If you could finish your lines, we'll be collecting them, and then there's badges at the end if you win. Have a break. Okay, bye.
Ladies and gents, if you could take your seats, please, and we will start the second half. Birthday party noises. Well, hey. Right. First up in the second half is one of our group founders. And she's going to be reading a story called Cats in Space. Please welcome to the stage, Mel Ciavucco.
It's Ciavucco, thanks. You should know that by now. Okay, I'm dressed like a hipster, hence the hat and the glasses, and I'm going to try and keep them on for as long as I can whilst I speak into the microphone. This is called Cats in Space. Prologue. It's not a novel, don't worry. Prologue. The Earth was invented by Mr. Earth in 1982. On the first day, he created tarmac. On the second day, he created perms and shoulder pads. By the sixth day, he created Duran Duran. And on the seventh day, he was knackered following a kinky evening with Simon Le Bon. He believed his great achievements was not the internet or social media, but in fact hipsters. They were the next evolutionary step for humans, paving the way... This has gone wrong. Hang on, sorry. Paving the way for a brighter future of beards, cats, and foods served on tiny bits of bathroom tiles. Unknown to humans, Mr. Earth went on to create other solar systems, one of which contained a planet solely for cats called Planet Meow. Earth. You want to send your cat into space? They asked him. Jay understood how crazy it seemed, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. Now he was left with no job, no cat, and no money for craft ales. It had all started with the lamb chop. A guy at work had sent a lamb chop into space using a giant balloon with a tracking device and a camera. Nobody ever thought it would work, but it did. The camera captured all of it. The video subsequently went viral, that beautiful blue glow framing the Earth behind the lamb chop. Everybody was astounded, and Jay started to wonder, what else can you do that with? Jay loved his cat, Mr. Tiddles. But he was so needy. He thought this might help burst Mr. Tiddles out of his comfort zone. Plus, the guys at work could really think he was a legend if he managed to pull this off. Mr. Tiddles would be famous. It would be awesome all round. Jay bought a cat-sized spacesuit from eBay for Mr. Tiddles and ordered the hugest balloon he could find. He launched with the help of a few friends and a few hours later set about tracking the landing. He found the camera and the GPS, but no Mr. Tiddles. Everyone said he was dead. He watched the video countless times, the curvature of the earth glowing behind Mr. Tiddles, but then it cut off. No more film and no more Mr. Tiddles. Jay busied himself with his beard, perfectly grooming it to look as if he'd put in no effort at all. Mr. Tiddles' litter tray was still in the laundry room. He just couldn't get rid of it. Call it a hunch, but somehow he just didn't think Mr. Tiddles was dead. He couldn't... Oh, sorry. He should never have sent him into space. Now he had to watch Netflix alone. He had to eat pulled pork alone. He had to put his vinyls into plastic sleeves in alphabetical order alone. Mr. Tiddles had always loved watching him do that. I'm now going to take these off because they're annoying me. Planet Meow. Mr. Tiddles, I believed, the fluffy white cat, named Fluffy, asked. Yes, he replied, glancing at the other cats sitting around the large oval table. Where am I? Fluffy put on some black, thick-rimmed glasses and turned on his laptop. Boardroom B, in the Whiskers building. Planet Meow. Welcome to our group. Memories were starting to come back to Mr. Tiddles. The long drive out to the field in the middle of nowhere, the straps, the balloon, the camera. I remember wearing a horrible silver suit with a plastic thing on my head, he said. He shook out his fur. That bastard had actually sent him into space. You were rescued by the Rangers, Fluffy said. You're among friends now, Mr. Tiddles. You see, we're all victims of hipster abuse here. Hipster abuse? Yes, we were all tied to balloons by our hipster owners and sent into space. All of you? Mr. Tiddles stared around at the group of cats. They nodded. There's many more too, Fluffy said, but we're working on a plan to get to the root cause and stop this horrendous act. The rescue teams continue to excel at the rescuing parts, but we want to try and stop it altogether, once and for all. The other cats meowed in support. We're called Cats Under No Threat, because we believe that no cat... Thank you. Because we believe that no cat should ever have to live under the threat of being put in a spacesuit, tied to a giant balloon and sent into space, just so that their owners can look cool. Hear, hear, cheered the other cats. You've joined us at an exciting time, Mr. Tiddles, Fluffy said. We're about to start phase 1 of our plan. Mr. Tiddles licked his lips eagerly. He wanted revenge on that bastard. We've got cats on the earth now, masquerading as humans, Fluffy said. They've infiltrated the governments, the shops, the schools. The cats jumped on the table, meowing excitably. OK, settle down, Fluffy smiled. The cats composed themselves and sat down. The first step, he said, was to take away the very core of what the hipsters need to survive. Earth. It was a Sunday afternoon, but it felt like morning to Jay. Hungover, he managed to make himself look almost presentable in skinny jeans, a check shirt and a beanie hat, and he headed out to his local cafe. He looked up and down the eerily empty street. Everything looked closed. On the door of the cafe was a handwritten note which read, "Closed due to flat white crisis." Jay got out his phone. Sure enough, hashtag flat white crisis was trending on Twitter. He quickly skimmed through an article. Cafes have shut down all over the UK following unexplained spontaneous combustion caused by flat white drinking. Sources say they're not sure if it's just flat whites or other coffee too, so avoid caffeine-based drinks altogether until further notice. Jay's face contorted into a scream, but no sound came out. In horror, he ran back to his flat, got back into bed, pulled the duvet over his head and waited for the nightmare to be over. He woke a few hours later and stared at his pale face and bloodshot eyes in the mirror. This is what it looked like to go one morning without coffee. Even as a child, his baby chinos contained more coffee than the average latte. He checked his phone. There was a message from his friend Sam which simply said, "No coffee? Fuck me." So if they couldn't have coffee, Jay thought it would have to be beer instead. Jay and Sam went to the new place down the road called Granola and Crapola. There, you could eat deconstructed Monster Munch, lick granola off a chopping board, and drink craft ales through a curly-whirly. They sat down on chunks of wood for seats, accompanied by a table which was too small to fit anything on. Mate, we'll be all right once we get these down us, Jay said, taking the first big gulp of beer. He ate the curly-whirly separately. He had no time for food matching today. I hope so, Sam said wearily, gulping back the beer. Jay felt the bubbles rising in his gut and unexpectedly burped loudly. Oh, God. He put a hand to his stomach but continued drinking. Sam had nearly finished his. Jay gulped faster to catch up. Christ, I needed that, Jay said, putting down his glass. He wiped his beard in case he had any beer or curly-whirly left in it. He burped again, but this time he was a little bit sick in his mouth. He swallowed, grimacing. Sam burped too and clutched his mouth, his eyes wide. Beery vomit started seeping through his hands. Jay was about to ask if he was all right, but instead a trail of projectile vomit burst from him and across the tiny table. Vomit exploded from Sam's hands and he fell to his knees, puking on the open floorboards. Jay fell off his chair mid-puke, splashing chunky ale vomit all over the exposed brickwork. He finally fell on top of Sam, the two men heaving in a pile, Jay puking up into Sam's beard. As Jay lay panting on his side, his gaze fell to the guy behind the bar. He wasn't rushing to help them. In fact, he almost had a smirk on his face. Then he disappeared in a flash. A few seconds later, a ginger and brown cat emerged from behind the bar. Jay blinked. His vision blurred, and he heaved again. Had he just seen a man turn into a cat? He must be delirious. Planet Meow. Aha! Phase 2 was a success, Fluffy told Mr. Tiddles. #ale-puking is trending on Twitter. All of Earth's hipster bars have been infiltrated. With no coffee and no ale, the hipsters won't be able to survive more than a week. Mr. Tiddles looked at the screen as they scrolled through pictures of hipsters covered in vomit. He couldn't help but feel sorry for them. He wouldn't tell Fluffy or any of the others, of course. They'd been working on this plan for years. Hundreds of cats were sent to Earth, placed in society to blend in like normal humans. Fluffy had told them some of the cats, which were originally created for Planet Meow, were experimented on. They could, in fact, shapeshift between cats and humans. This had made for incredibly moody, selfish humans, but this just helped them blend in as hipsters. Mr. Tiddles was starting to miss humans. Their silly voices and their awkward two-legged walks. He missed a good stroke, especially by Jay. Who else would give him pulled pork and soy milk? The hipsters didn't deserve all of this. Yes, they'd sent them into space with giant balloons, but maybe that was just their weird way of showing affection, like that time he decapitated a bird for Jay, but then he'd made him eat Tesco value cat food for a week after. Earth. Jay lay in bed, his face gaunt, with chunks of vomit still in his beard. There was no coffee, no beer, and the street outside looked like 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Piles of vomit everywhere and the odd passed-out hipster shivering in the cold. His mum had offered to bring round some Nescafe, but he'd nearly puked again just at the thought. Why were we being punished like this? He wondered. He thought back to the man in the bar. Was this something to do with cats? Oh, how he missed Mr. Tiddles. He wished he could tell him how sorry he was. He wondered how he could ever make it up to him. But then he had an idea which would solve the problem of coffee and beer and cats. He dragged himself out of bed, grabbed his phone and called Sam. Sam, I might be going crazy here, but I think maybe all the cats are pissed off. What? I've got an idea, Jay said, trying to pull on his jeans, tucking the phone under his chin. We've been working in bars and cafes for ages now. Isn't it about time we set up our own? Isn't this a conversation for another time? Sam asked. No, pressed Jay. I think we should set up a cat cafe. We could have coffee, only the best single origin, crowned by the fingers of virgins, and expensive beer and cakes made out of vegetables served on cake stands made out of crap vinyls. And most importantly, we could have cats, loads and loads of cats. The line was quiet. Well, Sam? Jay asked. Mate. Sam paused. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. But how will we afford all of this? Jay smiled to himself. He knew exactly what he needed to do. We'll crowdfund it. Planet Meow. The cats crowded around Mr. Tiddles, who was sitting at the laptop staring at Twitter. Hashtag Cat Cafe was trending. They'd just hit £1 million for what they hoped would be one cat cafe, now likely to be several. The cats were gobsmacked. Mr. Tiddles looked around the room. I don't know about you guys, but I think that balloon flight was actually pretty fun. The cats purred in agreement. Fluffy sighed. I guess they're not all bad, these hipsters. Mr. Tiddles looked at the screen again, the picture of Jay and Sam. Under it read, Mr. Tiddles, if you're out there, please forgive me. I promise I'll never tie you to a giant balloon and send you into space again. Please come back. Love from Jay. Thank you.
Mel Ciavucco. Got it right that time, didn't I? Mel Ciavucco, ladies and gentlemen. Calm down. Okay, so next up we have Anita MacCallum reading a story called Feed Me.
I've specially worn my birthday outfit for you tonight. Hope you like it. Thank you. And also I hope you're hungry. Really hungry. This is called Feed Me. Once upon a time, I had a life beyond this bed. But not now. Now I live here and only here. And he feeds me. I lie here in between these sheets, hungry, stomach growling, housing a larger need. Feed me. Apples, crunching, chomping, toast, not sure what would be most satisfying. A pile of chips with dips, mayonnaise, ketchup, a fat bacon sarnie, maybe a biryani, buffet style, all you can eat. Feed me. A crunching and a munching, and I'm consuming all I can see, inch by inch. Feed me. Husband, lean and taut, bringing me more than he ought to, laden down with yummy snacks to keep me close so he can relax. My stomach leads him to my bed, and I lay down my weary head, body changing, shifting, more rotund, lying here a chomping and a crunching all day long. Feed me. Feed me, iced buns, sticky, jam-filled, make it quick. Feed me and feed me before I'm sick. My mouth open and saliva gathers around donuts, chocolate coated. I'll eat them up until I'm bloated, a chomping and a crunching, weighted down with bedclothes, while consuming ciabatta, tonguing tarnapade, growing those inches and rolls that make my heart ache for another time. Time when he was mine, without all this massaging fat into pores, absorbing and claiming more territory with each flesh-eating millimetre. I'm a creature of habit, damn it. Feed me! Where's my cuppa, I shout. It's like I've landed him a clear clout across the head. Husband fetches and carries and pours him and me a cup of tea while I'm chomping and a crunching and a slurping and a burping. He watches death court me slyly, knowing it's almost too late. He sees me lying here masticating. Spittle foaming over skin. Desire has long gone. While I lie on this bed, dreams march quickly through my head. He can travel anywhere without a care, and yet he keeps feeding me, keeps needing me to be something, somewhere else. I say it'll always be this way, always be this way. Here to stay, growing and spreading and claiming more territory while I keep on, while I keep on, while I keep on and on and on and on, chomping and chewing and feed me. My mind ticks over, under, around and all the thing I'm focused on, a chomping and a chewing and a crunching and amusing over times long gone. The children once a shared heartbeat, now only constellations spiralling out of my galaxy. Repelled by these actions, and yet we can't stop. He wants me for my strength, my presence, and I want more than my food. I want him inside me, but not sexually. Cupboards bare, money spent, I'm eating and eating down to bare bones. I lie here grubby and tubby upon our double bed, lift my head gradually. He opens the door, creaking and creeping across the floor. He is my opposite, thin and grey. I have leached the essence from his skin, the colour from his clothes. My veins pump with his purity, and yet I'm crunching and munching, and I still want more. Feed me. In these times I crave solace and truth, and I see none outside this place, not in these times. These times of closed minds, shut shops, and right-wing shop corners. There's nothing for me in this time. So I focus on his face as his slippered feet shuffle towards me. My eyes search his empty hands as those fingers stroke my face, those empty hands. No smell of pans or sauces or meat or jam. There's no food in the offering, and my stomach is empty. This mountain in front of me needs feeding quite desperately, and I'm trapped here in this homemade cage that he's made. I'm stuck here. My mind starts to think, my brain begins to turn to action, and that cannot happen because his fingers are touching me apologetically, and my tongue tastes his salt. While my teeth start to crave that chomping and a chewing, I cannot stave away the notion and the motion of that chomp and that chew, and I bite down into. Red, maroon and claret streams down my throat, a mote of him trickles and begins to form a puddle of him in my belly, and I want more. Feed me, chewing on his fingertip, nails and fibre, crunching and munching. He's on my mattress. I want to kiss him, but I can't. Mouth chews and chomps. The hand that feeds me, the hand that fed me, is now part of me, and my body still wants more. His eyes still blue, still waters lie deep. He wants me to have my fill, tasty husband, down to the bone, his dedicated finger, serving shoulder, all his life, messy now, Merlot-clotted sheets now. His voice is gone. I cannot hear his shrieks now. Eyes contain bleak future as I ignore and a chew and a chomp for more and more, and feed me. Who can I blame for my action? For my shame, for playing the eating game. I've consumed the person who kept me sane. I've eaten the only person who kept me sane. Well, to be honest, there's nothing much more to do. Quite frankly, between me and you, I can't go outside. There's nowhere to hide. All I do is take pleasure in my food. There's no other place I'd rather be, and very soon, I expect, you'll join me.
Thank you, Anita. You also win Best Dressed Person in the Building tonight. Okay, next up we have Mr. John Holland, who has come all the way from Stroud, all the way down the M5 to read for us tonight. Welcome to John, please.
Thank you. I wrote this one for a miserable Christmas evening we had in Stroud, only I was too miserable to go to it. which is why you're hearing it this evening. It's called The Fish It Was That Died. The fish it was that died on Christmas Day in the tank in the dining room. It was no ordinary fish, a sucking catfish, bought 19 years earlier as a tiddler and now a full foot in length. A swimming carapace of a fish, stoutly armoured, bug-eyed and primeval, a plecostomus, pleco for short, but no more, a dead plecostomus on Christmas Day. In the days preceding Christmas, the children, Jim and Ed, 9 and 6, tears welling, had watched its decline, as if watching an incontinent grandparent, greatly but slightly distantly loved, slip into oblivion. The children, you see, had grown up with the fish, the pleco. It had always been there, always been part of their lives, like milk, nits, and destructive middle ground politics. Now the game was up. It floated rigid, lifeless, head down as if dive-bombing the gravel at the base of the tank, like a Japanese kamikaze pilot, dead on Christmas Day. It had been, a very special fish. It wasn't just its age and size that made it so special. It ate, like other sucking catfish, slices of potato and cucumber, which we dropped into the tank, and which it rasped with its gummy plates in its mouth over days or even weeks until they were sucked away, totally consumed. On one very special Christmas Day, in happier times, we had turned on the lights on the aquarium, festooned with tinsel, to find a slice of potato in the tank, transformed by its gummy rasping into what was, unmistakably, the face of Jesus Christ our Lord. A perfect two-dimensional representation. Eyes, nose, mouth, beard, hair, mole, all represented accurately in a single slice of potato. Not the body, of course, that would be too much to ask. The head of Jesus lying there, smiling beatifically on the gravel in the bottom of the aquarium. eBay, suggested the wife. I'll think about it, I said. But of course, when I'd thought about it, by the next morning, with another night's rasping by the fish, the face of the potato Jesus had changed. The mouth now larger, obscenely wide in fact, gaping apparently in laughter. The eye sockets more cavernous, so that Jesus was now the Joker, played by Heath Ledger in Dark Knight. Not a good look for a religious prophet made from potato. It was too late for eBay. Surely no one would ever now worship this particular slice of potato. By the next day, day 3, the former potato Jesus looked like one of the horribly melting faces of the German soldiers, including the one played by the British character actor Ronald Lacey, who opened the Ark of the Covenant at the end of the Raiders of the Last Ark. By day 4, the pleco had consumed Jesus completely. Jonah in the Bible might have been envious. But I must tell you, there was more to this fish than that. As well as its religious sculptural skills, it was also the only fish that I ever taught to speak words. For many years I had thought teaching fish to be a fruitless, pointless waste of my time. I had spent too many years, many hard, challenging, demanding years with gudgeon, tench, and indeed shabunkin, held to be the most intelligent of all fish, leaning over the tank, repeating and repeating words and phrases, many words over many years, all falling on deaf subaquatic ears. It was depressing. And more than once, I, and indeed others, had questioned my sanity, especially as fish do not actually have ears. But a mere 12 years of daily repetition, time I consider well spent, with the pleco, this special fish, and I had my breakthrough. In one single day, it learned a total of 3 words or phrases. 3 in one day. They were food, bath, and love you. Food seemed perfectly reasonable. A fish is constantly looking for its next meal and can never remember that it falls daily at the same time. And love you, well, it was mutual, I can assure you. Although, and I would like to emphasise this, at no point at all, was it in any way sexual. What they said simply wasn't true, or at least it was a great exaggeration. Bath, well, somehow seemed the least likely word for it to utter. I do not recall repeating that word. The fish, being in water, was in many ways permanently in a bath. So requesting a bath seemed superfluous, even ridiculous. A friend suggested that it wasn't saying the word bath, but in fact, bathos, meaning a lapse from the sublime to the absurd, an anticlimax. Perhaps so. Perhaps it really was bathos. Friends who called seemed to really enjoy the talking fish and laughed joyously along with me, and definitely not at me. No, not at me. But those so-called experts, and they were many at first, who came to listen, who came to examine the talking fish, and who left with that look in their eyes without finishing their cups of tea, were jealous. Of course, they may have stayed longer had the potato Jesus been there to lend his support. You will understand that I tried to teach more words than those. I spent 7 months on saxophone and a year on umbrella. Perhaps my vaulting ambition got the better of me. I know what you're thinking. I know what you want to ask. Did the pleco have any final words? Did it impart any unimaginable gems on that Christmas day before departing for the big flowing river in the sky? Well, in fact, it did. As it was about to breathe its last watery breath, it opened its capacious mouth and sang part of the 3rd verse of Love Cats by The Cure. Then curl up by the fire and sleep for a while. It's the grooviest thing. It's the perfect dream. And then it died. My wife and I discussed the burial with the children. At sea, perhaps, after a period in which it lay in state in the garage. Lines of tearful neighbours paying their last respects. In the end, we lobbed it on the compost heap and bought a new one on Boxing Day. Are you happier now we have a new baby pleco in the tank? I asked the children. Not really, said Ed. It was such an ugly fish, we never really liked it. Yes, I thought to myself, it must have said bathos.
Thank you, John. Very, very good. So we got one more story for you this evening by Ms. Christie Cluett, who is one of the founders of Stokes Croft Writers. This is a story called The Silence of the Number 40 Bus.
Birthday! Exciting. Anyway, so this is The Silence of the Number 40 Bus. I don't like riding the bus this late. Not without Malcolm, said Wendy, who was sitting alone in the first seats on the left, straining forward to direct her words to the driver. The driver didn't react, just kept staring straight ahead. The bus's headlights carved a narrow path out of the darkness. Wendy patted at her frizzy, dried hair and squeezed her handbag at her ample chest. The small terrier dog inside whined softly. Don't worry, David. We'll be home soon. She glanced out the window as she continued to mutter into her handbag at David, who didn't seem to be listening, but was frightened by her own pale reflection against the background of the heavy rain outside. It's really raining out there, It really is, said Wendy, giving up on the driver and turning to see who was behind her. A middle-aged couple sat wedged firmly into a seat, two behind hers. David and I like to get off the bus, get an earlier bus, so that we're home before it gets dark, Wendy said, lifting up the dog and letting it lick her face. We don't normally catch, the man said, pulling up the collar of his blue waterproof. The bus? Do we, Harold? Said the woman next to him, pulling his collar back down and smoothing the sleeves of her identical but red waterproof coat. No, we don't, Glenda, said Harold with a sigh. A younger man, the only other passenger, was staring at Wendy. His left hand gripped the rail of the seat in front of him with white knuckles, while the other hand tugged repeatedly at his untidy beard. He looked away just as quickly, muttering something under his breath as the bus slowed down. Waves of water splashed high up against the side of the bus as it dipped into potholes and then reared out of them. All the while, the bus driver hummed a merry tune, accompanied by the beat of the rain on the roof. Wendy lurched into the handrail of the seat in front of her as the bus tipped forward into another hole and then sat heavily back down as the bus came to a final stop. Everyone was silent as the accelerator revved, as the driver changed gear, but the bus didn't move. The driver opened the half door next to his seat, glanced quickly at the passengers, and then started to put on his coat. Everyone else watched in silence. He patted his pockets and then opened the doors and walked out into the night. No one asked where he was going or how long he'd be. Instead, the doors hissed closed behind him, and the four of them sat there, staring ahead, waiting. Wendy coughed once, twice. I don't know about you, but I don't mind silence. I quite like it, actually, she said, still facing the front of the bus. We enjoy our own company, don't we, David? No one responded. Wendy turned, but no one looked at her. It is late. I should be in bed, really. Her laugh with a short burst. Not that I'd sleep. The silence dragged until Glenda slipped up and made eye contact. Glenda said. Harold and I have a mug of hot chocolate before we go to bed. Helps us sleep. Wendy gave a wide smile, clawing at the hair caught in her mouth. Do you? Glenda nudged Harold with a practiced elbow. Yes, we do, he said. Like a hot chocolate, we do. Glenda is quite right, he said, with a nod that didn't stop. Wendy nodded along too, and then Glenda joined in, while the young man glared at them. Malcolm didn't like hot chocolate, Wendy said. Not the kind I made. What's wrong with the packet? It's got chocolate in it, doesn't it? He said it tasted like broken dreams. Whatever that meant, said Wendy, frowning at the floor and then smiling at the other passengers. Shut up. It was quiet, but distinct. Wendy, Glenda, and Harold looked at the young man who had squeezed his hands into fists on the top of the seat in front. Shut up, he said again, louder. Then the lights went out. The lights have gone out, said Wendy. Jesus, say what you see, said the young man in an angry mutter. I can't see anything, actually, said Wendy. Can't you shut up for a single minute, said the young man. Silence and darkness. Perhaps the lights will come, said Glenda. Perhaps the lights will come. There was a pause that was difficult to listen to, and then Glenda finished her own sentence. Back on in a minute. May, said Harold. Maybe, said Glenda with a half-hearted chuckle. Let the man finish his sentences, said the young man. Well, I've never, Glenda said, stumbling, and then falling silent again. In that dark silence, there seemed to be no boundaries for her words to hit, so she continued. Harold and I have always finished each other's sentences. It's something we do, isn't it, Harold? Always have and always will. Silence. Won't we, Harold? Silence. Then Harold sighed. Well, he said, if truth be told, I'm not actually that keen on it. He let it hang there for a moment, and when the darkness didn't object, he continued, really, I'd like us to have our own sentences. Silence. I hate walking too. It was a blurt. I hate baking shows and anything to do with celebrities dancing. I want to go to battle reenactments and imagine I'm Richard III, and I want to watch TV shows about giant fish that eat people. Harold was slightly out of breath. Silence. Really? Glenda said with a break in her voice. Really? Well, then I hate TV altogether. Can't stand it. What I really want to do is wear your clothes and listen to Radio 4 documentaries on the political situation in the Middle East. I want to grow my lady moustache and smoke a pipe. Silence. I just want someone to love me, said Wendy with a short, unamused bark of laugh. Silence. I always wanted babies because they'd have to love me. No choice in the matter. Malcolm left me when he found out I couldn't. He left me for an older woman and they adopted. We could have adopted, couldn't we? Silence. Then the young man spoke. I want to go a whole day without talking to anyone. I have 12 sisters and 2 brothers, and my head is full of their words, their boring, stupid words. And it's not just them, it's everywhere. Everyone's sharing where they are, what they're doing, what they're eating. I'd like someone to ignore me for the rest of my life. Come home, say nothing, smile, and not share our bloody days. Silence. I wish I could turn David into a real boy, Wendy said, who could be my child and then would grow up and be my lover and we could have babies. Silence. I don't like sex at all, said Glenda. In a perfect world, I wouldn't have to touch anyone for the rest of my life. Silence. I don't want to tell another person my name ever, said the young man. Silence. I lost my virginity when I was 29 to Glenda, and we haven't had sex since. I tried joining an online swingers group, but they never wrote back, said Harold. Silence. I had the only orgasm of my life with David, said Wendy, as David whined slightly from her handbag. At the same moment, the lights came back on with all eyes on Wendy, who was sitting round in her chair facing the others. The 4 of them, strangers again, blinked in the bright. Wendy slowly turned back to the front, clutching her handbag, and David tightly to her chest. In the bright light, the bus was too small as they sat staring forward, not looking at the words they'd spoken in the dark, now painted on the walls for everyone to see. The doors hissed, and the bus driver climbed back onto the bus. Replacement will be here in a minute, he said, not looking at them, and them not looking at each other. Well, Wendy patted down her hair and coughed gently into the silence. Everyone faced forward as the bus sat in the darkness, turned away from the sight of themselves being reflected back at them.
My God, that was dark. Right, Christie's going to come back and finish the lines.
Woohoo! Here I am. Okay, so we have read, we have digested. There has been some excellent submissions. So what we're going to do is, so for those of you that are new, the winners of Finish the Lines get a once-in-a-lifetime, priceless Talking Tales badge. No. So what we've done is done the top 3 from each line. So I'm going to go in reverse order. Hold on. Yeah. Okay, so first one is it's my party. It's my party and I'll eat too much cake, drink too much Fanta, punch everyone off the trampoline and then be sick in my own mouth. Roll on next year and being 68. third place. Second place, it gets a bit political, guys. It's my party and I'll spend 9 million on EU referendum leaflets if I want to. Nice. And to continue the theme, and first place and badge winner, it's my party and I'll not stand down due to financial irregularities, David Cameron. Make yourself known now?
Yeah.
Now, Andrew. I'll get you a badge in a minute. Okay, so second one. Hold on, they're in weird order. Third. Second. Okay, so in third place, all Jeff wanted for his birthday was a lack of beef. He was a vegan working as a butcher. Nice. Wait. Oh, shit it. Hold on. Oh, all Jeff wanted for his birthday was a pet fly that eats shit. No, I thought it was brilliant. On my own. Okay. Fuck you guys. Right, and in first place, number 2, all Jeff wanted was, for his birthday, was an animal carcass, some chocolate fingers, and a condom stuffed with onions, so he could finally finish his groundbreaking experimental mural. So, no, John! Yay! And the last one. Seamless. Yeah. Okay. In third place, Daphne hated her birthday because she hadn't been born yet. But she was enjoying this one because Mum was downing Buckfast and Daphne the fetus had a marvellous head rush and the amniotic fluid was all the colours of the rainbow. In second place, Daphne hated her birthday because Scooby always chewed up her presents, but she was enjoying this one because Scooby had recently been spayed and lost all his vim. Although someone from Stokes Croft Writers pointed out some technical spade-neuter thing that I won't go into. Still, you got second place. And in first place is Daphne hated her birthday because she was 3 and hated everything, but she was enjoying this one because she could still shit her pants and get away with it. Probably the last birthday she could do that with a smile. Well done. So, thank you all so much for coming to the Talking Tales birthday anniversary. There are still party poppers if people want to go mental in the corner and eat all the cake you can. As Chris said, the next one, Talking Tales, is going on tour. It's going to be incredible. So hopefully you all come to that. But yes, as long as you signed up to the email list, we will keep harassing you until you just give in and keep coming. Thank you all very much.
You have been listening to Talking Tales, the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to tell us what you thought, are interested in performing at an upcoming event, or just want to know when the next event will be held, visit www.stokescroftwriters.com or look up Stokes Croft Writers on Facebook or Twitter. Talking Tales is a bi-monthly event held in Bristol, UK. It is organised by Stokes Croft Writers and hosted at the Left Bank on Stokes Croft. Thanks for listening.